Hi, this is Jack Stanley, and while I am lying here and will be in position for a little while as I get over my operation, I thought it would be a fun thing to just sit and chat a little bit, have a little conversation with you. And I wanted to talk about the birth of this nation and the beginning of the presidency. It's nothing short of incredible that we became a country. Nothing short of incredible. There was no reason we should have been able to do it. The fortunate part for us was the ineptness of some of the British generals or admirals at the time who did not truly believe that we could do much of anything. Also, in the beginning, you had the Howes, the general and admiral. They weren't totally against this whole idea that was going on in the Americas. They were rather friendly toward it, but then they had to fight it. So what I think their plan was to just make them so tired and just don't hurt them too much, but hurt them enough where they realize they just can't survive. And that was basically what was done for a while, except it's an amazing thing. They used to call Washington the Fox because he was always able to just get away before the dogs caught him. And that was much of the beginnings of our American Revolution. It wasn't where we fought battles and defeated. It was that we fought skirmishes and survived. Since we're always on the run, they never really wanted to go head to head. I mean, it would be insane on our part. And so Washington just kept us running. And as long as we could run, we could survive. Of course, we had by this point, the Declaration of Independence, which was very, very nice if you think about it. But it stated an idea. It did not state a fact. I mean, it says that we are the United States of America. Well, we were the only ones that believed that at the time. The British didn't believe it, and the British were of a mind in 1776 that this bunch of rabbles will be, taken down. And you have to understand that the British looked at us as rebels. We were called rebels. And something less than gentlemen, too, in many of the things that we did. And you'll see in the newspapers. I have some newspapers from the time of the American Revolution. And the British, once again, mentioned the rebels, and how they almost caught George Washington, and how they almost did this or almost did that. It was a constant chase. It was not out-and-out battles. The war was fought. It went on. In 1777, our Continental Congress started working on something called the Articles of Confederation. Now, you have to understand the entire mindset of everyone involved in writing that. We're fighting for our independence. We're trying to get away from this extremely powerful central government. We're dealing with members of various parts of government that were powerful. We didn't want that either. So if you think about it, the Articles of Confederation are going to be a complete 180 from the present British system, which meant the states were powerful. The federal government was almost non-existent. It existed, it was weak, it was unable to basically do much of anything except deal with the states, who were the powerful members of this gathering. In many respects, the states were countries. Each country had their own militia. They had their own money systems. They had duties and tariffs and everything like that. They were like a separate nation. And each one of these states or countries, whichever way you want to look at it, were sending ambassadors to Europe. And in some cases, European countries were sending 13 ambassadors to the United States because each state was its own country, very loosely held together by this Articles of Confederation. And of course it led to battles. If you had to bring something from New York to Virginia, you'd have to trade in your money each time you went. You'd have to pay a tariff. It cost a fortune. Certain states liked it. Virginia liked it quite a bit. They didn't like the idea that they had the same vote as everybody else. But the one thing that they did like, there was a lot of money to be made in tariffs. Maryland and Delaware also made out a lot. They were very small, but they were important gateways to get to the north or to the south. And so they had some very high tariffs. And that's where a great deal of their money was made. And so to make the Articles of Confederation work better, there were many attempts to get together and fix it. Each one kind of failed. And finally, they decided they will have the gathering on the Articles of Confederation in Philadelphia in 1787. Now, while this is all being put together, there's a plan being hatched, and the main instigator is James Madison. James Madison assembles his team, Hamilton and Jay and himself. Now think about it. Madison, Jay, and Hamilton. Those are the three authors of the Federalist Papers. I had the opportunity to look through some of Mr. Jay's papers. Fascinating individual, not talked about too much. But I do believe in the future we're going to start hearing more and more about Mr. Jay. And then the great catch of all, Madison wooed and finally got George Washington to come. If he had not gotten George Washington, nothing would have happened here. But they got to Philadelphia, and they went to work to improve the Articles of Confederation. And then came their chance. The four of them hijacked the entire convention. They took it over. And suddenly it was announced, we're not repairing the Articles of Confederation, we're trashing it, and we are creating a whole new form of government. Well, people walked out. People screamed and hollered and said they're trying to turn this into a monarchy, trying to make someone king. And what are the rights? Who has the right to say what? There was just so many arguments on this. And Hamilton, Madison, and Jay, who was really a good individual in the background, worked very hard. And what they used as their palette for the convention was that they brought George Washington. Washington was not there for his intellectual prowess. He was there for one reason. He was Washington. He was the heartbeat of the nation. He was the image of the nation. He was the great hero, the great Cincinnatus of the nation. He was beloved. And if you have that beloved figure in this arena, in this convention, and he supports the new hijacking, well, what are you going to do? You're going to go against Washington? No, you're not. Some did. Patrick Henry was absolutely livid. He made one of his great speeches and stormed out. But they worked at it, and finally a constitution was created, and even they developed the office of president, which was very, very interesting. One thing we don't talk about too often is a good deal of how our new constitution works. Was basically we copied a lot of the Massachusetts Constitution, which incidentally was written in 3 days by John Adams. Still in effect, by the way. That's really the oldest constitution, in the country. And he doesn't get much credit on that, but I'd like to mention that real quick. And so it was finally approved. They had to sell it to the states, to the colonies. That was no easy task, and there was a lot of people against it. So they said we had to vote. We had to have a certain number of states. So they decided 9. When everybody was saying, is there a reason behind 9? They said no, just less than 10, because they counted it and figured they might possibly get 10. Might. So they just lowered the number to 9. If we get 9, okay, it's approved. And they got the 9 states. That's how it worked. There were certain states that just didn't want to join. If you read in the history, you'll discover many of these folks, as an oversight, never did sign it, and it isn't until the 19th century, and I think in a case or two, the 20th century, that they finally became part of the United States, at least on that paper. And the presidency was started, that unique office, and no one knew what to expect, what was going to happen. They didn't know if the whole idea would live or fail. James Madison was somewhat optimistic. He said, I expect this Constitution to last about 100 years. Well, here it is. It's 234 years this year that the Constitution's been kind of operating things. So, I figured I'd just ramble on this for a little while and talk about things. I'd like to talk about some of the smaller, more detailed things that we don't talk about very often. And since I'm lying in bed and I can't move and I'm just bored out of my gourd, I hope you would please allow me to speak a little bit and chat and give a little bedside conversation. All the best to you. Thank you.